essential self that's consulted. There is some permanence and some pieces that are, collected and sort of remembered. But it can very quickly be changed with new information because it's constantly being updated. By the way, that reminded me of something is that even if we're in a closed system, in that it's closed as far as all the input is predictable, it's known, nothing else is going to come. A system also serves a purpose. It has a function, right? There are certain things that are asked of any processor, that it's supposed to do a thing. There are changing measures of whether this thing is the right output or the wrong output. So not only do we have to look at changing inputs, we also have to look at changing demands, changing environments that are going to be reacting to these outputs. So the only way rationality would be possible is to exist in a closed system, meaning both sides were closed, only predictable inputs, and there was never going to be a change in how an output was going to be evaluated. But because the world changes, the inputs change and the demands change. So impossible. Rationale is impossible. All right, very good. Because there's no such thing as a perfect rationality that's just ready to take. I can't conceptualize it anyway, and I don't think that Mother Nature and our genome figured it out. But a way for a system to be rational without being prepared for information. How can it always perfectly treat information without having been trained to perfectly treat information? Now, if we're rational souls, you can say God put it in there. Okay, if you believe in gods, then okay. None of this explanation is going to work for how we're not rational. God gave us all of how to treat every information that He anticipated, a piece of information that He anticipated that we would get. Okay. All right. So this is because, as James said, part of who we are is defined by our material possessions, which is why institutions in the past removed them to eradicate the sense of self. Uniformity, both in clothing and personal possessions, and face tats, or to have no face tats, was regulated to prevent individuals retaining their individual identity. Some of the most harrowing images from the Nazi concentration camps are the pile of personal possessions and luggage. And I've been to Auschwitz, and you see all the shoes, and all the shit they collected, all the personal items they collected. And then I guess put somewhere if we still have the shoes. Or were they a reconstruction of the shoes? I don't remember. No, because there were like actual hairs on the clothing and stuff. I don't remember. Some of the most harrowing images from the Nazi concentration camps are the piles of personal possessions and luggage that were taken away from the victims in an attempt to remove their identity. These objects are now regarded as sacred. In 2005, Michel Lévy I don't know. A 66-year-old retired engineer took his daughter to see a Parisian exhibition on the Holocaust with objects on loan from the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial and Museum. There he spotted his long-lost father's cardboard suitcase with his initials and address. I hope he's going to talk about how also you remove the individuality from the guards as well. So they forget about their personal values, about their family obligation stuff. And all they are is a cog in this concentration machine. Gas machine, whatever. Michel. So anyway, so he's at this exhibition, 2005, and he spots his long lost father's cardboard suitcase with his initials and address. Michel demanded its return, leading to a legal battle with the museum that stated that all objects from the death camp were to be retained for posterity as sacred items. 4 years later, a settlement was reached whereby the suitcase has been loaned to the Paris exhibition on a long-term basis. The need for identity is so strong that when prisoners or institutionalized individuals are stripped of their possessions, they will confer value on items that would otherwise be considered as worthless. In some individuals with obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, object possession becomes a pathological condition known as hoarding. I don't know, in which the household can become filled with worthless possessions that are not thrown away. In one unfortunate case, a hoarder was killed by the collapsing mound of rubbish that she had accumulated over the years. Most of us are more restrained and have a few cherished personal possession or household items with which we identify. One of the first things individuals do, maybe I'm hard with photos. One of the first things individuals do on moving to a new residence is to bring in personal objects to stamp their identity on their new home. In contrast, sometimes people may destroy personal objects as a way of symbolically cutting ties with the past, especially if if they are a jilted lover or cheated spouse. Absolutely. It's like you're not driving over to that city to give your stuff. No, put it in a donation box. And also, I've cut my hair often in important transitional moments, whether I was shaving all of my hair, whether it was cutting off my afro. Yeah. All right. Section. When losses loom large. Clearly, for many people, possessions are an expression of personal preference. If we have critical recognition, face tattoo doesn't need to be rational. Now, it does need to be rational in the sense that now, are your expectations that you are going to enter into communities where face tattoos are discouraged and disapproved? Okay, now you're not being rational. But if that is not your plan, and if in fact you are trying to make sure that you never go that road and poison yourself with that road, as tempting as it may be to integrate into the people sometimes, you want that reminder and want to be really good, really clear sense of self, then okay, well, the way to do that given the human mind, well, face that too, or color your hair, or always wear, something, always, change your name, stuff like that. All right. If you're serious, though, it's the face tat. People choose to buy certain products when clearly, for many people, possessions are an expression of personal preference. People choose to buy certain products that they believe reflect qualities with which they would like to be associated. These are objects aligned with an identity to which we aspire. This link between self and possessions is something that modern advertisers have been exploiting for years. They understand that people identify with brands and that the more that a brand signals success, the more people want it. Rolex watches, iPods, and Nike shoes are just some of the branded objects that people have lost their lives defending from thieves. Russell Belk, professor of marketing at York University in Canada, calls this materialist perspective the extended self. About the experiencing self, the remembered self, now the extended self. The Raven. These post-its are part of my extended self. We are what we own, and when these possessions are violated through theft, loss, or damage, we experience this as a personal tragedy, like when I've lost hard drives with videos or photos. Only recently, this happened to me. I am not particularly car proud, but when someone deliberately scratched the paintwork on my car a couple of months back, I felt very upset, as if the crime had been deliberately perpetrated against me. It was a random act, but I felt enraged. I imagine that if I had confronted the perpetrator, I could have lost it and acted violently. And I could have lost it. That's pre-it theory language. Instead, you would say, those lower brain mallets, the fighting, remember? Yeah, feeding, some fighting, fleeing, fornication, or something. Hypothalamus stuff. Oh, that would have sir-livered the different cortical tuits who are like, oh, we're not supposed to do that. Because they would have been intense. P300? Um, Only recently this happened to me, blah, blah, blah. Even ruthless killers and drug dealers appreciate the importance of possessions. Vince the Hitman from the modern classic movie Pulp Fiction, 1994, complained to Lance, his dealer, about a Chevy Malibu car that got scratched. Vince: I had it in storage for 3 years. It was out 5 days and some piece of dot 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 with it. Lance: they should be dot 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 killed, man. No trial, no jury, straight to execution. Of course, I would not go as far, but there is something deeply emotive when it comes to someone violating your property. Section: the endowment effect. Our attachment to objects may have less to do with personal choice than we imagine. In what is now regarded as a classic study in behavioral economics, Richard Thaler handed out $6 college coffee cups to half a class of Cornell undergraduates and then allowed them to trade with their classmates who made them a financial offer to buy the cup. So he handed these cups out to half of the class. Okay. The other half could buy from that half. What Thaler found was very little trading because owners place much greater value on objects in their possession relative to what other people are willing to pay for them. Moreover, as soon as an object comes into our possession, we have a bias to overvalue it in comparison to an identical object. This bias, known as the endowment effect, has been widely replicated many times with items ranging from bottles of wine to chocolate bars. Even when the object is not actually in one's physical possession, such as when bidding for an item in an auction, the prospect of eventually owning something produces a bias to value it more. So there's in it that its job is, if there's a prospect of eventually owning it, then that is of high value. Okay, that's what a sentence means in real terms. So then that it gets slapped by that process, livers, and then, well, it livers. So then the X liver is going to be a little bit different because it's going to include a greater valuing than you would have had otherwise if there wasn't that prospect. Even though that prospect is not great imitation reality, because that prospect maybe shouldn't play a role. People who bid for the same items in an auction, but had been People who bid for the same items in an auction but had been allowed to handle the items for 30 seconds, compared to those bidders who had only examined the object for 10 seconds, were willing to bid 50% more for the same objects. However, the context seems to be the critical factor. If we are just told that we own something, then that does not trigger endowment. So that's what the if is. If in contact with an object, then that object is yours and valuable. So, and even if it isn't yours, it's going to be considered yours and valuable. So you're going to pay more to make sure that you have it here because it's already fucking yours. You touched it. The longer we are in personal contact with an object, the more we value it and don't want to part with it. Is it any wonder that we are always being invited by salespersons to go for a spin or try things on? They know that once we have made that first contact, achieving the sale is much easier. A commonly accepted explanation for the endowment effect is not so much that we value everything we can potentially own, but rather that we fear that what we might lose. This bias is called loss aversion, a core component of the prospect theory proposed by Daniel Kahneman, the same scientist who left colonoscopes up the backsides of patients for an extra 3 minutes. According to this theory, losses are weighted more substantially than potential gains. Just like switching doors on the Monty Hall problem or selling our lottery ticket, we fear losses greater than we welcome gains. The prospect of regret seems to weigh heavily for us. So he has resolved that question that we had. We didn't know about the gain or the loss. And he's saying that a commonly accepted explanation that it's not about the gain. And it's not about that endowment. No, a commonly accepted explanation for the endowment effect is not our focus on the possible rewards, but that regret, that fear, blah, blah. All right, whatever. Section: the trading brain. Brian Knudsen has been looking at brain activation during buying and selling product scenarios using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, technology. You want to eat, buddy? No. We're going to stop recording when you eat. Fuck it. Fuck. How much more of this chapter? I'm sorry, I just said that. We got hold on. All right. Just you wait. You wait. 2 seconds. You wait. Neo, come here, buddy. All right, the trading section of the trading brain. Brian Knutson has been looking at brain activation during buying and, you remember what were we talking about? Oh, we just switched pages. During buying and selling product scenarios. Using functional magnetic resonance imaging fMRI technology. He found that when we look at products we like, irrespective of whether we are buying or selling, there is increased activation of the nucleus accumbens, a region of the brain's reward circuitry. See, when I think about it, I think of, that's why I get confused with the anterior. It's such shit because it doesn't have. I need another brain poster, don't I? It's gonna be months before I get my skull. Alright, this sun is setting. Let's finish this chapter. Okay. Okay. What is the mesial prefrontal cortex? That is not real. I don't think that exists. I've never heard of that in my life. And the S is right next to the D on the keyboard. Okay. He found that when we look at products we like, irrespective of whether we're buying or selling, there is increased activation of the nucleus accumbens, a region of the brain's reward circuitry. When we think that we can buy it at a bargain price, the mesial prefrontal cortex, another region, and if it's the medial prefrontal cortex, we're talking medial, closer to the center, not in 3D space, but medial, lateral. So when we think that we can buy it at a bargain price, the medial prefrontal cortex is also activated. Is also activated, but not if the price is too high. Right? So it's only if we think we can buy it at a bargain. After all, most of us like a bargain. However, if people were presented with an offer to sell a desired product at a lower price than expected, then the insula in the right hemisphere became active. And this is about anticipation and disgust, either anticipation or reward or disgust. This region signals discrepancy between anticipated goals and outcomes and could be regarded as the neural correlate of disappointment. Moreover, the insular activity was predictive of the size of endowment effect for each participant. These imaging findings are consistent with the loss aversion account, whereby a discrepancy of perceived value and the offered sale price produces a negative emotional response. It's not that we simply have a bias, but rather we feel bad about selling a possession for a price below what we believe it is worth. This aversion to loss sounds remarkably similar to insecure attachment, when individuals cannot bear to be separated from loved ones. Individuals who are rated anxious in their personal relationship attachment style showed a much stronger endowment effect in that they demanded a higher price for personal possessions. They weren't just clingy to people, but also clingy to objects. Moreover, if they were primed to think about past relationships that made them feel anxious and insecure, the endowment effect was further increased. Clearly, emotions linked with our past social relationships are registered in our brain and can spill over into our, my quotes, reasoning systems when it comes to how we value possessions. 2012. It was 2012. It's okay. Section, the extended self. Despite 30 years of research on the endowment effect, only recently have researchers started to look at the phenomenon in populations other than North American students. This is an important limitation, as other cultures have different attitudes toward ownership. For example, in comparison to Westerners, Nigerians are reported to value gifts from others more and exhibit less of an endowment effect for personal possessions. A recent study of the Hadza hunter-gatherers of northern Tanzania also found Tasmania. Of northern Tanzania also found no evidence of endowment for possessions. This difference is believed to reflect the cultural difference between Western societies, in which the self is thought about mainly as one of independence, compared to non-Western societies, especially those in East Asia, in which the self is thought of in terms of its relationship to others, or interdependence. For example, there's a self-characterization test called the 20 Statements Test, in which participants have to write 20 statements in response to the question at the top of the page, who am I? It is a fairly simple measure of their self-concept, reflecting various attributes such as physical characteristics, I am tall, social roles, I am a father, or personal characteristics, I am impulsive. After completing the 20 statements, these are categorized as being internal, traits and intrinsic qualities, versus external, social roles and relationships to others, social roles in relationship to others. In comparison to individuals from interdependent societies, Westerners typically make more internal statements compared to external references. How do these differing self-concepts manifest when it comes to ownership? One suggestion, following from Belk's extended self idea, is that the endowment effect is at least partly a function of the tendency to value the self. But not every personal attribute is fixed. Psychologist William Maddox and his colleagues first established that the endowment effect was not as strong in East Asian compared to Western students attending Northwestern University. However, in a clever twist, Maddox asked the students to either write about themselves or their relationships with other people. This task can shift the self perspective from being focused on oneself to one's relationships with others. When East Asians focus on themselves, they endowed things they owned with greater value, whereas Westerners instructed to write about others showed the opposite, or reduced endowment effect. So you can increase the endowment effect for East Asians by forcing them to think about themselves. And then, like we talked about earlier, you got different mechanisms triggered by different inputs, right? Different conditions. Okay. Everything about it here is 100% true, obviously. Not only do we overvalue our own possessions, but we also covet that to which others seem to pay attention. It turns out that when we watch the other people looking and smiling at objects, we automatically prefer them to objects that have not been looked at. These sorts of studies show that when we come to value things, make choices, and exhibit preferences, we can easily be manipulated simply by considering context and our role among others. Being a member of a group generates our self-concept in ways that seem to defy the notion that societies are a collection of individual selves. Rather, our self is a reflection of our extension, not only to our possessions, but also to everyone around us. Which is fantastic way to finish because of what we opened the video with. But that probably was not all on one drive. Anyway, the next chapter will be How the Tribe Made Me. Very exciting. Here's the thing. I actually want to read more because I have critical. 2024 Ekber 23W 2046 or 47. Having critical recognition. I know I got to work when I can. And also, I am pretty tired though. Love a drink. By the way, haven't had, or been tempted really, a drink for about 10 or 11 days. I think as a kid, I always thought real men go to AA. Real men become alcoholics and then surmount that, get over that. Or, struggle with that and find solutions, whatever. But I can't get the first step. I'm perfectly fine. I should say, I have had 3 beers. Saw a friend, had 2 beers, and then had maybe one, and then had one the next night. But I think we spent like 3 nights hanging out. And I was like, nah, I'm good. Right now, though, a little bit of whiskey. We've done a lot of work. But anyway, the point is that I'm thinking that because I'm tired. Ego depletion, which means less inhibition, which means less of being able to stay focused and, interrupt myself and get back to it. But on the other hand, I'm hoping that also the thoughts are a little bit fatigued, less, this has to be said, and this has to be said, and this has to be said. There'll be the same amount of urgency for the things that I do come up with, because we're defining urgency by the absence of inhibition. But anyway, look, I just want to read more, and it's not like we're not making progress. Yes, there's a lot of talking. But look, we're 51% through the book. What did it take us? 10 hours? 12 hours? Nothing. And it's the self-illusion. It's important. All right. Chapter 6, How the Tribe Made Me. Oh, I got the car running. That's okay, because you're watching this while I drive, so it's like, cool. Did you know that one of the most terrifying experiences people can imagine, in case this is the start of a video, The Self-Illusion, How the Social Brain Creates Identity by Bruce Hood, 2012. Chapter 6, How the Tribe Made Me. Did you know that one of the most terrifying experiences people can imagine is speaking in front of other people? When this fear becomes so extreme that it begins to affect how people live their lives, it is known as social anxiety disorder. According to the American Psychiatric Association, it is the #1 most common anxiety problem and the 3rd most common mental disorder in the United States. More than 1 in 10 of us have social anxiety disorder, which is surprisingly high given that we are such a sociable species. Why is this? The mind that generates our sense of self is a product of a brain that has evolved to become social. But in being social, the self is radically altered by the presence of others and our need to fit in with them. This is such an imperative that being in a group can be one of the most life-affirming experiences, but also one of the greatest anxiety-inducing challenges. One theory is that other people trigger our emotions reflexively. I feel like you already explained it. It's an imperative. Anything that's an imperative, where it's high stakes, that means it's emotional. In this case, the emotion is anxiety. You've explained it for me. Now, one theory for what? Why we feel so much anxiety? Because we need to. We're the descendants of people who needed to fit in. But how, the specifics of that anxiety causing? All right, yeah. One theory is that other people trigger our emotions reflexively. As soon as we are in a crowd, we become aroused. The limbic system that controls our behavior responds automatically to the presence of others. Arguably, this is the basic function of emotions, to motivate social behavior to either join or avoid others. I have defined emotions as being a boost for high-stakes situations. There are different kinds of boosts. When there's a threat that you can't do anything about, you need help with, it's fear. But also, and I've explained this, sadness, for instance, and then also I think fear. Sadness is about, I got a situation. I can't do anything about this, and it's a bad situation. I need help with this. Wow, 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 wow. And everybody else is programmed, look, wow, wow, wow. I need to go help them. Or I need to stop being mad at them about that other thing because there's a more pressing issue. Okay. Yeah. So, arguably, this is the basic function of emotions to motivate social behavior, to either join or avoid others. But it doesn't have to be social. Like anger can be about accomplishing an individual's objective, even if everybody's fighting against you. You can be like angry that this thing isn't being done. You need this thing done, high stakes. Let's have some anger, and that gives you the boost to fuck the rest of them and do your thing. Okay, but then haven't we brought it back to social? But we didn't have to. If you made it like, frustration, anger, you're hunting, and your bow just keeps fucking, your arrow just keeps it's off, and it's a fucking bow, and you just fucking smash the bow, and you get super angry, and you go and you build a better bow, and you wouldn't have switched out the bow if you hadn't gotten angry. It's happened before that the arrow was a little off, but now you just couldn't take it anymore. Stakes were high, and so you couldn't take it anymore and needed a solution. So your anger got you to do one. So no, I'm not with you, Bruce Hood, that it's I think it doesn't always have to be social. But I definitely hear you on the emphasis on the social stuff. I hear you on that for sure. When people simply look at us, we become aroused by the focus of their attention. In one of our studies, we showed that direct attention from staring eyes triggered pupil dilation, which is controlled by the limbic system. This system controls how we interact with others, whether we fight them, flee from them, or fornicate with them, or feed on them. Sometimes arousal can improve performance. We run faster, cycle faster, and basically up our game when others are about. However, this energy can also impair performance when we are not that skilled in the first place. When others look at us, our mouths dry up, our voice trembles, and our hands shake. All signs of limbic arousal. We gotta get this poster, bro. These are the butterflies that we get in our stomach, and it explains why opening night nerves are a common experience for actors who are not yet comfortable in their roles. It's only when we become expert that we can rise to the occasion, or a little illusion of control. You're up there, because that's what happens, right? You're super scared the first time, and then, unless you're a career actor, but you're super scared the first time, and then even 6 months later you do a whole nother series. You're super scared the first time, first line, just walking up there, and then you start speaking, and it's like, and then that could be illusion of control. It's a reminder, oh, I'm in control, and what I say, blah blah. And then also, of course, you get some applause. It's generally encouraged to be a supportive audience. So you don't even have to become expert to rise to the occasion. However, not all group behavior leads to increased performance. In a tug of war, teammates expend about half as much less energy than when they pull as individuals, in a phenomenon known as social loafing. Cerebro limbico postero. Okay. Poster. Okay. We have lots of this one. We've already got this one, though. See, this one has some limbic stuff on it. It's got 1 star. Anatomy of the brain. This got some neurons on it. All right, hold on. I'm back with you in a second. What about like a store? What about like a store in Seville? I'm not seeing a lot of great options. That's really good. I hate that it has 1 star. Got the limbic system. Let's add it to the cart. Why's it got 1 star? So the paper and the printing are bad quality. Fair enough. Let's go to a store. Okay, social loafing. What's social loafing? Remember? Say it out loud. Tug of war, remember? I pull 100 when it's just me. And when I'm in a group, I pull 50 because I can rely on the others. Remember, we always prefer, the brain is built to save energy. I mean, to be social, but not to expend too much energy doing it. As soon as we blend into the crowd, we no longer feel the need to put in as much effort if it is not recognized. It is only if the group appreciates our efforts that we try harder. This need for recognition also explains why groups can become more polarized on issues that would normally generate only moderate views. In an effort to gain approval, individuals adopt increasingly extreme positions that they feel represent the group, which in turn drags the group further toward that position. If you couple that dynamic force with groupthink, the tendency to suspend critical thinking, my quotes, suspend critical thinking, when we are one of many decision makers, so as to try and galvanize the gathering. If you couple that dynamic force with groupthink, the tendency to suspend critical thinking when we are one of many decision makers so as to try to galvanize the gathering, then it is easy to see how we behave so differently in groups than we would as individuals. It explains why the rise of political extremism requires not only the determination of the few, but also the complacency of the many. When we are in large groups, whatever self we believe we have is swamped by others. And too bad he hadn't written this after the proper advent of social media. The illusion is to assume you are more autonomous than you really are. Section Suicide Baiting. In January 2010, a distressed woman on a bridge over the M60 motorway in the United Kingdom brought traffic to a 4-hour standstill while the police attempted to talk her down. A radio DJ, Steve Pank, thought it would be a funny prank to play Van Halen's hit track Jump for the frustrated drivers caught up in the drama. Moments later, the woman jumped, allegedly after hearing the song on a radio turned up by one of the waiting motorists. Luckily, the woman survived her suicide attempt, but Pank was unrepentant. Left to his own devices, the DJ would not have taunted the potential suicide victim unless he thought his clowning would please the listeners. The drivers trapped on the motorway would probably not have normally wished this woman harm either. They were sufficiently removed from the incident that they did not feel any consequences of their actions. This kind of crowd behavior is known as suicide baiting. Fortunately, it is very rare, probably because most suicides are not public spectacles. However, there are well-documented cases where crowds have urged individuals to kill themselves. How can we understand such behavior? Conceivably, this is not the sort of thing that individual members of a crowd would normally encourage on their own. One explanation is that groups create de-individuation, a loss of the individual self. An analysis of 166 failed and successful suicide attempts across the United States between 1966 and 1979 found that crowds were present in about 20 of them. And of those, half were found to bait and jeer the victim. The factors that seemed to link to baiting were larger crowds, the distance between the crowd and the victim, and the cover of night. Arguably all factors that lead to greater anonymity. Anonymity to outsiders appears to be the crucial factor when individuals feel that they are not accountable, which leads to greater antisocial behavior. Riots, lynching, and hooliganism are all believed to be examples of mob mentality that are thought to thrive through the process of de-individuation. In contrast, the more that we lose anonymity, the more we conform and behave. In one simple study, researchers placed a picture of a pair of eyes on the wall See, Pinker said that this wasn't replicated. He's saying that this is just goofy, silly pseudoscience. All right, well, now that I've said that, I'm going to continue reading it because I'm a believer. In one simple study, researchers placed a picture of a pair of eyes on the wall above a collection tin in the coffee room, where staff members paid for their beverages. For the next 10 weeks, they alternated posting pictures of flowers or watchful eyes over the coffee pot. People were more honest in paying for their beverages when the eyes were posted. Just like the self-conscious Halloween children, we are more honest when a mirror is present to reflect our behavior. When we are made self-conscious, we become more accountable. For example, students consider working on an exam paper after time is up as cheating, and yet 71% of them continue to do so if left alone. However, only 7% do so if they are made self-aware by a mirror hanging in the exam room. I wish he had set a percentage for how many students said, yeah, that's cheating. I mean, I agree. I would expect it to be most students, and I also believe that 71% wouldn't activate if they were alone. But wish you had said. Anything that exposes the self to the scrutiny of others makes us more pro-social. And remember, of course, if you're a veteran, you're going to hate me for repeating this, but what we are not describing is someone going, oh, hey, there's nobody around. Now I can stop pretending to be pro-social, or when they're being pro-social, oh shit, there are people around, I better be pro-social. No. Okay. It's earlier in the processing, and it's just that. And you would come up with an excuse for it too. If we were able to do the experiment with just you, put you in a public setting, then we had you in an individual setting, and we did that 5 times each, you would have an excuse for every time you continued in the individual setting, even if in the public setting you never continued once. What are the chances that that excuse only happened to be valid when you were in the individual setting? No, honest, I get what you're saying. I get it, and I think this stuff is so cool, and I love psychology, and I think it's so important to be humble. But honestly, like in this case, I had because I was thinking about the time, I had misspelled my last word, and so I was just scratching that out and correcting it. But if you had been in the group setting, very likely that you would have been like, fuck. Okay, yeah. But I don't want to cheat, and it's really your definition of cheating changes. That's what I mean. It's earlier in the processing. All right. So it's a different definition of cheating. It's not like, okay, so here I've already done the definition of cheating, the evaluation of my act. I've determined that it is cheating, but because there are people around, I'm not going to do it. Or because there's no one around, I'm going to do it. No, actually cheating. We wouldn't even see it as cheating. You wouldn't. Or I don't know how long these people are continuing. He didn't give us many details about the experiment. Now, if they're continuing 2 to 3 minutes, then maybe they would say, oh yeah, then I really needed to write this, and I thought nobody's going to know, so I'm going to do it. Okay, yeah. But I was just imagining, because I'm very strict. I can't stand, I think you have no integrity if you don't put your pencil down the moment that it is said. Every student that still was going had no integrity for me. Anyway. Does one really lose his individual identity in a crowd, as de-individuation suggests? As psychologist Von Bell points out, anyone who has ever found themselves in a situation in which they are suddenly under threat as a group does not necessarily lose identity. So Bell says, anyone who has ever found themselves in a situation in which they are suddenly under threat as a group does not necessarily lose identity. They just see themselves as part of a different, larger collective. As psychologist Von Bell points out, anyone who has ever found themselves in a situation in which they are suddenly under threat as a group does not necessarily lose identity. I don't know what that means. They just see themselves as part of a different, larger collective. I understand what that means by itself. I don't understand what the sentence is. I don't understand. For example, imagine, thank you, you get on a crowded late night bus home where there are groups of drunken students, an elderly couple, and maybe a teenager playing his music too loudly through his personal stereo. You do not feel anything in common with them and might even resent your fellow travelers because you don't feel anything in common with them. So things bother you that wouldn't with your kin. However, if looters, aliens, or zombies suddenly attack the bus, you spontaneously feel like a group and formulate plans to fend off the threat. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so when a group is under threat, they do not necessarily lose in what? They don't. You do not lose your identity, but form a new one to address the group concern of which you are now a member. It's the storyline of many movie scripts in which individuals discover themselves in threatening situations, and of course, this is where the heroes and villains emerge. So, groups do not cause the individuation, but rather trump individualism, depending on the context. I don't understand that at all. So, groups do not cause the individuation, but rather trump individualism. Mm-hmm. I got you. So if some kind of a base state is individualism, when you're part of a group, it's not that you lose that individual stuff. It's that you prioritize the group identity. So that you will see a lot less individualism. But it's not the individualism that changed, it's that it got trumped by the groups, by the group cause. So they don't necessarily lose identity, they just see themselves as part of a different, larger collective. Okay, but all the other stuff indicates that they do lose identity there. I see why they don't necessarily lose identity, but you already convinced me that they do. You already convinced me that I don't understand. Monkey in the Middle. Do you remember the childhood game Monkey in the Middle? It's a wicked teasing game. Usually two players are supposed to pass a ball backward and forward to each other, and the monkey is the person in the middle who has to intercept it. Sounds harmless, doesn't it? Except that whenever I was the monkey, I used to get very upset because it seemed as if I was being excluded. I bet my dad couldn't play. I bet he could never play that game. I bet he get upset at anyone for even suggesting it. Oh, you would love a chance to exclude me, wouldn't you? Fat chance. I'm gonna go sit in the corner. I'm certain. I bet he'd be laughing if he heard that. He's having memories of doing exactly that. Alright. Caring about what others think. Maybe one of the strongest preoccupations we have as an animal. Indeed, as Philippe Rochard has pointed out, to be human is indeed to care about reputation. Reputation. To be human is indeed to care about reputation. To be ostracized from the group is the worst fate, which he calls psychological death. Being ignored and rejected by our peers is painful. Most of us can remember being very upset when we were teased as children or not picked to play on teams. Not me. I had a very healthy attitude in child. Ask me about a time when I've been picked on, and I'll just think of times when there was a misunderstanding and the whole group of assholes had misunderstood, and it was frustrating. They could have done better, but or no, but they couldn't have. It is what it is, though. But teasing, being a victim, I don't know about that. I'm sure I haven't seen it that way. I got teased on my first job. Loved that guy. one of the people I look up to the most, and I'm taking it. I'm loving it. It was a new manager. I was a new package sorter, 17 years old, and he threw every joke and insult my way, and I'm having a blast. And you can tell me they're laughing at me. The only time I got angry was when one of the package sorters called me a monkey, actually. Or maybe, or did he say the N-word? I don't remember, but there was some racist thing. Um, and they kept throwing this package, and I had to try to get it. He kept calling me a monkey. I'm just joking. But he did, there was some monkey thing or something. But actually, I you know what? If my manager had been white, he was black and Puerto Rican. I mean, black American and, well, yeah, Latino Puerto Rican, like brown. His mother, not black. Anyway, that was a stupid thing to say because it's all made up, the colors and stuff. And she's brown because of the Africans, not like natives, American natives. Right? Is that not right? I don't know. I'm trying to move away from that sentence, but I loved it. And I didn't love it. For probably times where I was like, ah, oh, fuck, he got me again. I gotta look cool or something. I don't remember any of that. And then I would go hang out with him on the weekends, go to his house and stuff. It was just more of the same. I think at some point I did get frustrated about it when it was even just the two of us and that was happening. I didn't mind it in the group. He was just being awesome. And I was the guy playing the role to support his awesomeness. And we're bros. I love it. I think it was like when it was just the two of us, he's like, give me too much advice or something. I was like, oh, yeah. Let's do that when other people are around. That's fine. Let's be real now. No, I thought he was super impressive. Oh, I'm going to hate myself for all this talking. Okay. So to be human is indeed to care about reputation. Psychological death is ostracization from a group. And being ignored and rejected by our peers is painful. And most of us can remember being teased or not picked to play on teams. Losers can. Or people with unhealthy attitudes about themselves and their interactions. At the time, these events seem like personal tragedies. This is why bullying is not simply physically abusive, but psychologically traumatizing. Oh, yeah. Because, like, you gotta have some, as a kid, being excluded from groups and stuff. It's just part of life. Something you gotta learn. You gotta learn the rules of. Good to learn as a kid. You got excluded from that group, and then you got into another group, and it was okay that you got excluded from the first group. Maybe you even got back into the first group, and you figured out some ways to do that. And that needs to be in your toolkit as an adult, because you will get excluded, and you will, and so on. You need to be able to have a healthy attitude to that. But if it's just like constant and the kid doesn't even get a chance to like learn from it, where we're on such, our roles are so clear, and that's what happens when you have bigger communities. Everybody's specialized. That is the loser and that is the bully. There's no way to get out of those roles once you have those roles. But you can't get out of it when you're just a normal member of the group, but you did something or they didn't like something, so they kicked you out. And you get rejected, you get made fun of, but it's not like that's your role. It's just about that one thing. And then you learn techniques to blah, blah. I see. This is why bullying is not simply physically abusive, but psychologically traumatizing. According to a 2001 survey by the U.S. National Institute of Child Health, 1 in 3 teenage children was involved in bullying. It is more prevalent in boys than girls, and the patterns of abuse are different. I bullied once, I think, on a school bus, and everybody was cheering me on. I think it was my friend, and maybe I made some like little joke. Somebody thought it was funny, laughed. Everybody's getting in. What'd you say? Say that again. I said it again, and one of my most shameful memories. But I also was a defender. I stepped in for Christian Weiss, and did a jump rope fight with Josh DeGand. It wasn't just over the twins, the Reynolds twins. It was also because he was picking on Christian. And I said, hey, why don't you pick on me? Why don't we have a jump rope fight and settle this? I think it was also about the Reynolds twins, but no. When people made fun of Christian for picking his boogers and stuff, I got up in their faces. My dad remember him because we went to the movies with him, picked up movies, and he's standing there in his bedroom window. This is how I remember it anyway. He's got sunglasses on. He's inside, second floor, first floor in Europe, and he's up there. We drive up, and he's in his bedroom window, and he's been looking out with his sunglasses on, and then he sees. Well, he did eat his boogers though. For males, no, it is more prevalent in boys than girls, and the patterns of abuse are different. For males, both physical and verbal bullying is common, whereas for females, verbal bullying through taunting and rumor mongering is typically more common. However, even though girls are use less physical violence, neuroscience indicates they might as well punch their victims, as the pain of social rejection is just as real. I thought about that. I've never hit a woman. I think that's true. That seems like too general of a statement. And like, what do you mean by like hit? Like, have I slapped or knocked the tooth out? Sure, but I've never like taken a baseball bat. I'm just joking. I'm sorry. No, but I dragged a woman by the heels. I'm sure I've grabbed a woman. But I've not, yeah. But I've never like hit a woman, or have I shoved a woman? A woman, sure, but like a partner, I don't think so. I don't think so, bro. I'm sorry. I should say that more conviction, but like really, I don't think that. Definitely, that's not something I would do. But has it ever occurred? Has that ever happened? But anyway, so I have thought before that, and I don't want to be like a men's person, like a sexist. But this is something that they say that's kind of true. It's that like women can do some damage with words, but I can't even think of any woman that said anything really hurtful to me where it felt like they had attacked me. One girl told some people that I had only lasted like 3 seconds, and she was being nice. It probably lasted a second and a half, if you count before she opened the door to when I ejaculated. That was like awkward for me, but it didn't feel like an attack. Anyway, so you got this unfortunate thing where men are much better at physical violence. Women are much better at verbal violence, according to him and what the red pill people say. Dangerously good at it. But the trade-off, the exchange doesn't, of course, work. Because one of them could actually kill you, and one of them is just psychological death. But you hit someone too much, that can be real death. You make them feel like absolute shit and like they're not a member of the group. Okay, psychological death, but it's still not real death. However, even though girls use less physical violence, neuroscience indicates they might as well punch their victims, as the pain of social rejection is just as real. And it may be in some ways just as permanent. It still won't stop the system completely. This is something the psychologist Kip Williams, and also we know that if we allow men to just, okay, I got angry, I gave her a little slap, right? I have a friend from the woods who I'm sure he has done it. In front of me, all he's ever done, I mean, she's, right? So when she's not hospitalized and she's in his tent, she's screaming, she's singing, she's screaming, she's sobbing and stuff. And I was like, do you need me to give you another? Well, he won't say it like that. He's, shut the fuck up. I'm going to give you another. You know I don't want. Gosh. And I don't think he's ever beat on her. Like, I'm not about to try to come up with the laws of domestic violence. I don't know what I'm doing. Excuse me. I'm shutting the fuck up. There are better and more intelligent people than me, more informed people than me to